I had been secretly married to Ethan Cole for 3 years, and our relationship was always one of politeness and respect. It wasn't until one day when a confession video from his teenage years suddenly went viral that I realized how deeply this usually aloof man had once felt for his first love. When I proposed a divorce and prepared to leave North City, Ethan was absent from the Golden Elephant Awards ceremony, but then he appeared right in front of me. "Why didn't you go to collect your award?" I asked. He shot a furious glare at the man beside me, his eyes red. "If my wife has abandoned me, what award am I supposed to collect?" That day, as Ethan trended online, I had just finished a class. The moment I stepped into my office, Mia Hart pulled me aside to gossip. I was shocked to discover that not only was Ethan a talented actor, but he also wrote songs, truly my dream man. The video was a bit blurry, but in it, a boy in a white t-shirt held a guitar, gently singing about the bittersweet feelings of a crush. In the last second, he leaned close to the microphone and blew a goodnight kiss. At that moment, I felt my cheeks flush. While the boy's face was unclear, the mole and unique voice unmistakably belonged to Ethan. Mia kept replaying those few seconds, exclaiming, "Who is Ethan Cole's wife? She's so lucky!" 3 years ago, he had won Best Actor at the Golden Deer Awards for his role in Brilliant Stardom. At the ceremony, the lead actress had tripped and fallen into his arms, creating a perfect scene. Everyone said the movie's ending had come true in real life. But right after that, Ethan announced he was married, leaving the identity of his mysterious partner a puzzle in the entertainment world. "Are you sure that song was meant for his wife? It could have been for someone else." I joked, realizing that as Ethan's wife, I was seeing this video for the first time. "No way! I refuse to believe it," Mia said, squeezing my shoulders playfully. "Admit it, you're just jealous." I couldn't help but laugh, not wanting to argue. Just then, my WeChat pinged with a message from Ryan Brooks. "Dinner at home tonight." I stared at the screen for 3 seconds before replying, "Okay." Then I told Mia I couldn't join her for dinner. She looked at me teasingly. "Your husband is back?" I nodded in response. "Well, with a husband who checks in 800 times a day, Ethan doesn't seem so appealing anymore," she said, her tone meaningful. "Have a great evening." I smiled slightly, thinking she might be misunderstanding the situation. My relationship with Ethan wasn't that intimate. What kind of obedient husband treats WeChat like a planner? When I got home, Ethan was already there. The messy house I had left in the morning was now spotless. He was wearing an apron and bending over, straightening the sofa. A thought flashed through my mind, and I almost dropped my bag to rush over. My underwear, which I had carelessly tossed onto the sofa earlier, was now embarrassingly exposed. I had felt it was untidy before leaving and had tried to hide it under a cushion. "Wait! Don't touch the sofa!" I shouted, but I was too late. Ethan had already moved the cushion aside. I darted forward, throwing myself onto the sofa to cover the underwear with my hand, but I lost my balance and ended up falling onto the sofa with him. "Ugh!" I accidentally bumped into his nose. "Does that hurt? Why are you so clumsy?" Ethan frowned and reached out to rub my ear. I instinctively flinched, a strange feeling stirring inside me. As soon as those words left his lips, we both froze, the air thick with awkwardness. Ethan quickly turned over, the cushion awkwardly landing on his lap, his skin pale, and his ears turned red. "Do you want to see more?" he asked quietly, his voice low and husky. I glanced at the cushion on his lap, my heart racing, and quickly backed away. When I returned from the kitchen with the dishes, the clothes on the sofa had been neatly folded by him. My face felt hot as I hurried to explain. "I was just in a rush this morning. The house isn't usually like this." Ethan merely raised an eyebrow, maintaining a calm expression. I knew he wanted to say, "I've known you long enough not to be surprised." He put a peeled shrimp in my bowl, and I said, "No need for that. This is more than enough." "Oh, what's wrong with that?" I popped a shrimp into my mouth and asked, "Why did you come home today?" He explained that they had only filmed for 15 days out of the 2 months planned. Usually, he stays on set the whole time, but this time was different. The media had been relentless, and I could see his annoyance growing. Ethan looked up at me and pointed to his left cheek. I instinctively reached to wipe that part of his face, finding it completely clean. Just as I was about to take out my phone to check my reflection, a refreshing citrus scent enveloped me. Ethan leaned in and gently wiped my right cheek, his fingertips cool against my warm skin. I hurriedly took the tissue from his hand. "I can do it myself." "Okay." Ethan twirled his fingers, but I noticed his neck suddenly turning red. My mind couldn't help but drift back to that trending video where the boy leaned in to kiss the camera, his neck flushed.
Ethan!
I felt compelled to ask the question. "Your confession song, was it written for someone you like?" I tried to keep my tone light. Ethan paused for a moment, then nodded.
Yeah.
My heart sank.
Who is it? Do I know them?
I pretended to be casual, but inside, I was starting to panic. I buried my head in my meal, trying to act like it was just a casual question. Long seconds passed before he softly replied.
You don't know? Huh?
It wasn't until he went into the bathroom that I realized he might be a bit upset. He, who was generally quite emotional, was acting differently. I sat in the dining room, the atmosphere turning cold, and the food in my hand lost its taste. Deciding to put the leftovers in the fridge, I opened it and found a beautifully packaged dessert from a famous old shop in the east of the city. The pastries were handmade and limited, with long lines every day. Ethan had never been fond of sweets. Suddenly, I recalled him saying earlier, "There are so many media people, it's annoying." Annoying. Enough to wait for hours just to buy himself a box of his favorite pastries? Ethan truly was hard to read. Having known each other since childhood, from kindergarten through high school, we had never developed any romantic feelings or flirtation. Our marriage was the result of an old promise from his grandfather, who was getting on in years. Ethan hadn't wanted it. He had actually knelt in the study for a whole night, even getting punished, which sent his grandfather to the hospital. I was the one who approached him, suggesting a marriage of convenience. In the hospital corridor, he had grasped my wrist, trembling slightly.
Sophie, don't regret this.
I held his wrist tightly, my heart racing.
I won't regret it.
If things didn't work out, we'd just divorce once his grandfather's condition stabilized. Before I could finish my thought, Ethan had taken my hand and we headed straight to the marriage registration office. I was still curious about the trending topics surrounding Ethan and decided to sneak into my room to check my phone again. When I opened Weibo, I nearly jumped in shock. There was a notification in the top corner showing 999 plus messages. Clicking on the comments, I realized that my old settings had allowed for 6 months of visibility, and now everything was back on display. Years of youthful crushes were laid bare. One post was going viral, a blurry side profile of Ethan from a high school sports meet where he was competing in the long jump. Back then, Ethan had gained a following as the foodie of the blogger. OMG, he's so handsome! My timeline was flooded with posts about Ethan from the last 10 years, all radiating a pure, youthful vibe. In a sea of male celebrities, I had always only followed Ethan. Just like back at the sports meet when the teacher had asked me to capture all the athletes' moments, I could only helplessly stare at him and say, "I meant all the athletes, not just Ethan." And there was that day when we received our marriage certificate and even my mom had said I was being too reckless about the future. Only I knew how fast my heart had raced at that moment when I confirmed our union. Suddenly, I felt a wave of anxiety about Ethan recognizing that account as mine. I knocked on the door to the side room, my steps unsteady. When the door swung open, I found Ethan in a loose bathrobe, his hair still dripping wet. Water droplets rolled from his temples down into his chest, hidden between the lines of his muscles, and the Bluetooth earpiece in his ear was flashing. I turned to leave in a bit of panic. "I'll come back later." Just as I tried to escape, I felt a force gripping my wrist, and in the next moment, I was pulled into the room, trapped between his arms. The earpiece was still connected, and I could hear his manager's voice clearly from the phone.
Who is this Polaris person? A high school classmate? Do they have any dirt on you? Should we reach out?
I strained to listen, my heart racing. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed as he seemed to lose interest and hung up the phone. The tension in my chest finally eased. He wouldn't know who Polaris was nor cared to find out. A lot of people had always liked Ethan, even back in high school. He was indifferent to everyone, including me. But today, watching that video, I understood how sincere and passionate he could be about someone he truly liked. "Did you need something?" Ethan's voice pulled me back to reality. I looked up and met his deep gaze, the anxiety bubbling within me. Tonight probably wasn't the right time to gossip about his life. I averted my eyes, remembering our agreement to not interfere with each other's lives. It was me who had crossed the boundary. Before I could finish my sentence, Ethan suddenly covered my mouth with his hand, his palm cool and mixed with the fresh citrus scent that made my head spin. It was probably just a trick of my imagination, but it seemed he chuckled softly. He released me and placed his hand behind my neck, his touch warming my ear and making my heart race. "What about that book you loved in high school? He's just that into you." His voice was low and magnetic. I was at a loss for words, the situation too overwhelming for me to process. Trying to suppress my racing heart, I recalled. "I sent it to a girl I'm sponsoring last month when I was organizing old books at my family home." Talking about the novel wasn't the best memory. I had gotten in trouble for reading it during evening study sessions, and the teacher had publicly scolded me in front of the whole class.
Having the top student, Ethan, beside you is such a waste.
The laughter of my classmates still echoed in my mind.
What's wrong?
Ethan seemed surprised, his voice low.
So that's how it is. What do you mean?
I asked, confused.
Star, ask me again.
He suddenly leaned in, speaking almost seductively.
Anything.
My heart raced uncontrollably, each beat echoing in my ears. Just then, my phone rang, and the screen displayed. Ryan Brooks. I wanted to hang up, but ended up accidentally answering in my panic. On the other end of the line, Ryan Brooks's voice almost pierced my eardrum.
Star! I'm back in the country! Surprised?
I immediately looked up at Ethan, who wore a dark expression. When we were kids, our families were neighbors. Ethan, Ryan, and I took pictures together every year, sharing a close bond. But when Ryan moved away at 7, it wasn't until high school that he joined our class again. When we reunited, Ethan and Ryan seemed to have a strange tension between them. Ryan would mock Ethan, saying,
"Look at him, acting all cool."
Ethan responded to Ryan with equal indifference. My mind raced as I pointed at my phone, indicating that I needed to step away. Just as I tried to escape Ethan's embrace, he stopped me. He leaned close to my right ear, speaking in an irritated whisper.
"Take the call here."
A shiver ran through me. In my left ear, Ryan's voice continued.
"Star! Why aren't you saying anything? Are you going crazy with happiness?"
I felt like I was losing it, everything swirling in confusion. Welcome back. Is there something you need?" Ryan's tone suddenly turned hurt.
You're so cold. The 2 years you promised with Ethan are almost up. Can I come back and steal you away?
My head felt like it was going to explode. What was he talking about? I buried my head lower, too scared to look at Ethan. Before I could even respond, Ethan snatched my phone away and hung up. He gripped my waist tightly, his voice icy.
Who is he trying to steal a wedding from?
Suddenly, I felt a surge of fear that Ethan might figure out which account I was using. As I knocked on the side room door, my steps wobbled. When it swung open, Ethan stood there in a loose bathrobe, his hair still dripping. Water droplets rolled down from his temples into his chest, disappearing between the lines of his muscles, and the Bluetooth earpiece in his ear flashed. I quickly turned to leave. "I'll come back later." Just as I tried to escape, he grasped my wrist, pulling me into the room and trapping me in his arms. The earpiece was still connected, and I could hear his manager's voice clearly on the line.
Who exactly is Polaris? A high school classmate? Do you have any dirt on him? Should we reach out?
I strained to listen, my heart racing. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed as he seemed uninterested, simply hanging up the phone. The weight on my heart lifted. He didn't know who Polaris was and didn't care to find out. Many people had liked Ethan, even back in high school. He was indifferent to everyone, including me. But today, after seeing that video, I finally understood how sincere and passionate he could be about someone he truly liked.
Did you need something?
Ethan's voice pulled me back to reality. I looked up and lost myself in his deep gaze, feeling a rush of emotions. This wasn't the night to pry into his life, so I averted my eyes, reminding myself of our agreement to respect each other's boundaries. It was me who had overstepped. Before I could finish, Ethan suddenly covered my mouth with his hand. His palm was cool, mixed with a fresh citrus scent that made my head swim. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but I thought I heard him chuckle softly. After releasing me, he placed his hand at the back of my neck, covering it entirely. My ears grew warmer, and my heart raced.
What about that book you loved in high school? He's just that into you.
His voice was low and magnetic. I was speechless, caught off guard by the situation. Trying to steady my heartbeat, I recalled. Last month, while organizing old books at my family home, I sent it to a girl I'm sponsoring. Talking about that novel wasn't a fond memory. I had gotten in trouble for reading it during study hall, and the teacher had called me out in front of the whole class.
With the top student, Ethan, sitting next to you, you're wasting resources.
The laughter from my classmates still echoed in my mind.
What's wrong?
Ethan seemed surprised, his voice gentle.
So that's how it is. Is it?
I asked, confused.
Star, ask me again.
He leaned in closer, his tone almost hypnotic.
Anything.
In an instant, my heart was racing, pounding wildly. Just then, my phone rang, and the screen lit up with
Ryan Brooks.
I wanted to hang up, but in my panic, I mistakenly answered. On the other end, Ryan's voice almost pierced my eardrum again.
Star, I'm back in the country. Surprised?
I looked up at Ethan again, and his expression had darkened. As children, our families were close, taking annual photos together. But when Ryan had moved away at 7, we didn't reconnect until high school when he transferred back into our class. On seeing them together again, an odd tension had arisen between Ethan and Ryan. Ryan would mock Ethan, while Ethan would respond with cool indifference. My thoughts raced as I pointed at my phone, trying to signal that I needed to leave. The moment I escaped Ethan's embrace, he stopped me again, leaning in close to whisper, "Take the call here." A shiver ran through me as Ryan shouted through the phone.
Star, why aren't you saying anything? Are you going crazy with happiness?
I felt frantic now, my thoughts a jumbled mess.
Welcome back. Is there something you need?
Ryan's tone turned slightly hurt.
You're so cold. You and Ethan's 2-year agreement is almost up. Can I come back and steal you away?
My mind was in a whirlwind, and I didn't dare look at Ethan. Before I could respond, he snatched the phone from my hand and hung up. He held my waist tightly, his voice cold.
Who's he trying to steal a wedding from?
One of the trending topics had an explosive mark next to it. The most popular series of images was leaked by an unknown paparazzo. At the end of the corridor, 2 figures stood close together, and the photo looked extremely intimate. As I scrolled through a picture of Clara James leaning in to kiss Ethan Cole, my heart sank heavily, followed by a sharp pain. My first instinct was to dismiss it as fake, but Clara's Weibo post felt like a heavy blow I couldn't refute. She shared a disc with Ethan Cole's name clearly written on it, dated June 1st, 2016, his high school graduation year. Clara deleted the post seconds later, but it had already been screenshotted and shared widely. Minutes later, she updated again with a hazy yet clear caption.
Accompaniment is the longest confession.
The comments section exploded.
Wow, you've been hiding this pretty well. From school uniforms to wedding dresses, I'm dead. Ethan Cole's studio, are you going to say something, darling?
Clever to ride the fame. I could write his name 100 times. It can't be real, right?
What's on the disc? Is it that confession video? Are you the heroine?
Before long, Clara liked that comment, as if to prove something, and then posted several photos from high school. I recognized those familiar uniforms and suddenly recalled some moments I had tried to forget. Like the time Clara and Ethan hosted the school's cultural arts festival, and Clara had come to ask me to take their picture. She had peeked into the classroom and called out,
Ethan, time for rehearsal.
causing a stir among the classmates, while Ethan had always remained calm, giving me the impression that Clara was nothing special. The clock in the office ticked toward 8:30 p.m., and my phone rang.
Star, when you get home, please share a bowl of sweet soup with Grandpa.
Grandpa George's voice was firm and powerful on the other end. I agreed and turned to text the housekeeper.
Has Grandpa been online?
The housekeeper replied quickly.
Yes, he nearly had a hypertension episode from getting angry.
Grandpa George was strict and hated the entertainment industry and all its scandals, yet both his son and grandson were in it. Ethan's parents had entered a business marriage with no real feelings. Shortly after Ethan was born, his mother suffered from postpartum depression and became overly dependent on his father. After seeing news of his father's scandals on TV, she went out and had a car accident on the highway, dying in the crash. Since then, Ethan had become Grandpa George's only source of emotional support. Everyone thought Ethan was a good boy, but little did they know he was brewing a major rebellion by stepping into the entertainment industry. After I persuaded him, Grandpa George finally accepted Ethan's career, as long as he didn't make a mess of things. Worried about Ethan getting into trouble, I drove quickly. When I entered the garden of the old house, I found Ethan kneeling on the ground. Just as I approached, I heard his voice. His tone was firm, piercing my heart like a dull knife. The only one I've ever liked is her. He really meant that? He only liked Clara? At the bar, Ryan swirled his drink, a playful glint in his eyes. I downed a shot of tequila and nodded, but the photos trending online felt like a heavy weight on my chest. Clara was holding the disc that Ethan had personally engraved for her. That was his handwriting, his strokes for the character. Had never included a hook. The alcohol stung, and I couldn't help but close my eyes, murmuring,
I've traced it so many times. I can't be mistaken.
Moreover, at the dinner table, Ethan had admitted that the confession song was meant for someone he liked. I took several quick gulps of alcohol before Ryan stopped me.
Star, you know, sometimes I find you a bit naive and easy to fool. I really should have tried harder.
My thoughts became increasingly muddled as I shoved Ryan's face away.
You can't fool me.
My phone lit up on the table. It was Ethan calling again, the number of calls I had missed slipping my mind. I had rushed out without saying goodbye and texted Grandpa that I hadn't finished grading papers. I left the old house but wasn't sure where to go, ultimately ending up at Ryan's bar. Aren't you going to pick up? Where's your husband? Ryan asked teasingly. I'm going to divorce him. He's not. I averted my gaze, staring at my phone. Ryan chuckled. All right then, I'll drink with you. I lost track of time, my head growing heavier. Even looking at Ryan became blurred. I thought about going to the restroom to splash my face and wake up. Just as I stood up, I stumbled forward. Ryan rushed to catch me, but before he could reach me, I fell comfortably into a pair of cool arms. As soon as I recognized who it was, I shook my head and pushed away. I don't need your help. Ethan frowned and pulled me back, securely wrapping his arms around my waist. You're drunk, Star. Hey, isn't this our big star? So glamorous. Ryan mocked without shifting in his seat. Ethan wrapped me in his overcoat. I'm here to pick up my wife. Instant warmth enveloped me, and I felt too weak to resist. Star, we're going home, Ethan said, his voice soft and familiar, carrying a citrus scent that felt so comforting. I instinctively buried my face against him, feeling my consciousness fade. As he carried me a few steps, I heard Ryan's voice from behind. Ethan, don't forget what you promised.
What did I promise?
My heart tightened. Did those two have a secret agreement? Pressed against Ethan, I fought to shake off my dizzy spell and wanted to ask Ryan, but Ethan pushed me back down. I strained to listen to Ethan's reply, but my consciousness continued to fade. When I finally regained my senses, I found myself still in Ethan's arms, but now in the familiar surroundings of home. I had actually woken up during the drive, just feeling dizzy and wanting to avoid any interaction, so I pretended to be asleep. Ethan laid me down on the bed and leaned in to help me take off my jacket. I groggily kicked one leg at him. With a sigh, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at me in disbelief. Our eyes met, and I quickly withdrew my foot, looking away.
Ethan, let's get a divorce.
I had mentally prepared for this all the way, but my voice trembled uncontrollably. Don't say things you don't mean. He replied softly, shifting a little closer. He reached out to wipe my tears away, his touch gentle. I deliberately smudged my tears on the cuff of his shirt, and he said nothing, even though he was usually a neat freak. A sense of unfairness washed over me, and my head felt fuzzy. You don't like me, you just sleep with me. What a jerk. Go ahead and find your first love. After all, we're just in a marriage of convenience. Ethan suddenly leaned in, covering my mouth and wrapping his arm around my waist, his gaze intense. I struggled to break free and couldn't say a word, so I turned my head away. He released my mouth and locked eyes with me, his expression deep and serious. Star, you are the one who slept with me. I couldn't help but recall that night when Ethan laid me on the bed and kissed me for a long time, finally retreating, breathless. It was me who had clung to him, not wanting him to leave. The guilt washed over me, and I felt ashamed. But then I remembered his first love, and I steeled myself. I don't care, I want a divorce. I'm going to like someone else. Tomorrow, I'll start liking Ryan. Ethan kissed me fiercely, deeply. My lips hurt, but I didn't back down, biting his lip until it bled. The metallic taste filled the space between us, yet Ethan didn't let go. I had no idea how long it lasted before he released me, gently biting my lower lip, his voice low and serious.
I don't agree. Star, you can't just toss me aside. You wanted this marriage. You can't just walk away.
Ethan's scandals were cleared up overnight. His studio released another angle of the surveillance video with even more convincing evidence. The footage showed Ethan frowning and stepping back the moment Clara approached him. On his personal account, he simply stated,
My wife is an outsider. I love her very much.
I was too busy drowning my sorrows to notice all this. For days, I hid in my apartment, ignoring Ethan's calls. That night, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had agreed to talk to Ethan the next day, but then ran off at the last minute. I regretted the impulsive divorce I had mentioned and didn't know how to face him. I told him I needed some space, and Ethan didn't push but continued to share his schedule. He was nominated for Best Actor at the Golden Elephant Awards and would be heading to Bay Province soon. The day before the awards, Ryan was returning to England. He messaged me after he got to the airport. When I arrived, boarding time was fast approaching. Are you really not considering breaking up with Ethan and coming to England with me? Ryan, wearing sunglasses, smiled confidently. I shook my head, glancing at the girl waiting at the boarding gate. Ryan, you know I've liked Ethan since I was little. What if he liked someone else? He asked. I paused for a moment, then answered firmly. Even if he liked someone else. Besides, I could feel his affection. I wasn't naive. That night, I had mostly just vented my feelings under the influence of alcohol. If Ethan really liked someone else, I would let him go. But what if he loved me? Being in unrequited love was always a grand gamble, wasn't it? Ryan smiled at me, mercilessly tearing down my hopes. You're just being foolish. Fine, let me be foolish. Have a safe trip, Ryan. I replied. He raised an eyebrow. You're foolish. I'll send you another gift. Suddenly, Ryan leaned in, cupping my face, drawing close before stopping just inches away. I quickly pushed him away. Stop it, Ryan. He stumbled back a couple of steps but didn't seem angry. Instead, he nodded toward me. I blinked, following his gaze, and froze. Ethan, who should have been in Bay Province for the awards ceremony, was striding towards me confidently. Clad in a full disguise, I recognized him immediately. The airport intercom blared, and Ryan grabbed his suitcase, flashing a smile at me.
You should give him a little crisis too. No need to thank me, sister.
In the airport lounge, Ethan pressed me against the door, his knees tightly gripping my legs as if to lift me. Did he kiss you? His voice was low, tinged with barely concealed anger. With his mask and hat on, Ethan's expression was hidden, but I could sense his displeasure. Why didn't you go to collect your award? There were only a few hours until the ceremony. There was no way he could make it. It was as if Ethan didn't hear me. He pulled off his mask and wrapped his arms tightly around my waist, increasing the pressure. His warm breath brushed against my face, and the atmosphere turned dangerous.
Where did he kiss you?
He asked in a gravelly voice.
On the soft spot of my right cheek. Here?
I teased, moving to the corner of my lips. Or here. My heart raced uncontrollably as I turned my head to avoid his kiss.
I'm about to divorce you, and you still care about that?
I tried to keep my cool. Ethan chased after me, resting his forehead against my neck, whispering,
Star, don't divorce me. I like you.
My heart jolted at his words.
You're lying.
I mumbled.
How can I prove it to you?
He paused, burying his head in my shoulder, his tone almost desperate.
Do you want me to dig my heart out and show it to you?
Ethan had never spoken like this before, and my heart softened in an instant. After he spoke, he stayed quiet, leaning against me for a long time. As time ticked by, I finally spoke up.
Then explain why you're still in North City, and I'll reconsider.
Ethan suddenly lifted his head, cupping my face as he kissed me lightly, then followed up with kisses on both cheeks. I couldn't escape his grip. It felt like being embraced by a big, clingy dog. After that series of kisses, he looked at me with innocence.
I'm worried my wife might abandon me. How could I think about collecting awards?
I couldn't help but laugh.
Ethan, being coy doesn't suit you.
He turned his head, his ears flushing red.
Ryan said he wants to take you to England. I'm worried you might actually go with him. Is that why you rushed back from Bay Province?
I looked at him, feeling a bit touched by this fool. Ethan leaned in and kissed my eyes, then took my hand, intertwining our fingers.
Actually, I might not win the award, even if I don't go. No!
I interrupted him, my voice firm.
I believe you will, so go for it. If you don't win, don't come back to see me.
I had checked the flight schedules. There was still time. Ethan hugged me again.
Then will you wait for me, please?
I didn't wait for him. A collaborative project with the first high school in the impoverished W County sent me there for a week of teaching demonstrations. I was busy with lessons, grading papers, and writing lesson plans while also trying to manage my students. I was totally absorbed in my work. Even the messages Ethan sent me were met with half-hearted replies. Just as I was about to put my phone down, another message came through.
Can I come find you?
On the day of the awards, I was on an old bus watching the ceremony. Ethan, dressed in a well-tailored suit, stood on stage holding his trophy, shining bright. My heart raced as I replied,
It's probably not a good idea. You're a public figure. Travel isn't that simple.
On the weekend, I was working overtime at the school. Suddenly, a stranger girl appeared in the office. The principal brought her to me.
Ms. Liu, this is last year's county top student, Cho Lijun.
Cho Lijun reminded me of the girl I sponsored. She had expressed a desire to meet me recently, and while I had sent her some living expenses through an intermediary, I had declined the meeting. The girl seemed nervous as she sat down and timidly apologized.
Ms. Liu, I'm so sorry. The video of Ethan, I posted it online. I didn't expect it to cause such a big reaction. Someone contacted me and offered a high price for the disc, and I sold it to them in a moment of confusion. I thought it would help pay back your sponsorship.
I was bewildered by her words. How could she even have that video? Then the girl pulled out a copy of.
He's just that into you.
The disc was tucked inside the book, and when I curiously flipped it open, I saw a photo from her phone. There lay the disc, its cover stating, 4-star. Signed by Ethan, dated June 1st, 2016. It looked exactly like Clara's handwriting, but included the words, 4-star. I asked her, "What happened to your copy of the book?" "I gave it away. After the college entrance exams, when you got it back for me, I never opened it again," she replied. I suddenly understood. What Ethan had meant that day was about this. He thought I had seen the disc and posted it online, which was why he rushed home. This disc, which I had never discovered, held Ethan's unspoken secrets. And I was at the center of that secret. After the girl left, the office returned to its quiet state. The sunlight poured in through the window, casting shadows on the book. "He's just that into you." As I put the book away and prepared to head back to the teacher's dormitory, I turned around and met a pair of deep-set eyes. Ethan stood outside the window, looking disheveled, his overcoat and shoes covered in dust, like a quiet tree standing still. I had no idea how long he had been watching me. He silently approached, taking my hand in his and asking calmly,
"Where are you staying?" "The teacher's dormitory."
I answered, stunned.
"All right, let's go,"
he said. As we walked, his demeanor seemed unusually calm. A few times, I wanted to speak, but his intense gaze kept me silent. As soon as we closed the door, Ethan pushed me against it without warning and kissed me. He was usually cool and gentle, but his kiss was deep and fervent. I instinctively struggled for a moment, but he scooped me up and tossed me onto the bed. When he came down on me again, Ethan's movements were much gentler. But as I obediently opened my mouth, he paused for a moment before returning to his passionate self. I realized it was actually quite interesting to see him lose control. The old wooden bed creaked, and suddenly I pushed him away, coming to my senses.
"There are people next door."
He didn't listen, and after what felt like ages, Ethan finally stopped, licking my lower lip like a beast. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse, almost desperate.
"I missed you."
He nibbled on my ear and buried his head in my shoulder, his tall frame feeling like a small creature seeking solace. My heart melted, and I breathed his name. "Ethan."
"Yeah? Did you like me in high school? Did you also start liking me early on?"
I couldn't help but ask. There was a moment of silence in the room before his deep voice answered,
"I've always loved you."
In that moment, a strange sense of grievance washed over me, accompanied by a soft ache. My throat tightened as I quietly asked,
"Why did you love me but not let me know? Why have we been two timid souls, silently loving each other for so many years? I always thought you liked Clara."
From Ethan's words, I realized that the 18-year-old version of him was the one I had lost. Back in high school, there was a phase when writing love letters was all the rage. I impulsively left a letter in Ethan's drawer. But when I saw him coming closer, I panicked. The cover had no name, just the big, dramatic title,
"To my beloved."
In that critical moment, I shot a desperate glance at Ryan. He ended up snatching the letter from me, joking,
"Hey, man, sorry, but this is for me."
To my surprise, Ethan immediately recognized my handwriting. I hurriedly pretended it didn't matter, but Ethan thought I had just accepted that the letter was for Ryan. Coupled with the awkwardness of adolescence, I was always cautious around the person I liked, but I was brash with Ryan. I even preferred to ask Ryan about the sports meet instead of going to Ethan. Ethan gently kissed the palm of my hand, holding my fingers tightly. He reminded me of that day during the sophomore sports meet. There weren't enough people signed up, and as the sports commissioner, I had to recruit from my friends. But Ethan was busy with a physics competition, and I didn't want to disrupt him. I flashed a charming smile at Ryan.
"Hey, Ryan, as the tallest and most handsome guy in our class, you wouldn't want to miss out on signing up, would you?"
Ryan raised an eyebrow playfully.
Don't call me that. I'm just a guy.
I rolled my eyes and forced him to sign up for the 3,000-meter race. As the registration deadline approached, the long jump event still had not filled up. Pouting, I held the sign-up sheet, ready to submit it, when Ethan suddenly pulled me back.
What event are we still missing participants for? Huh?
I was taken aback. Ethan took off his headphones, looking frustrated.
I forgot the registration deadline.
At that time, I naively thought he only wanted a break from studying. After returning from W County, Ethan and I went back to the old house together. When Grandpa George saw us holding hands as we entered, his previously furrowed brow melted into a smile. I ran over to him, wrapping my arm around his and apologizing for my sudden departure that day. Grandpa waved his hand with a chuckle.
You'll have to accompany me for sweet soup today.
He gently tapped Ethan's thigh with his cane.
You rascal, if you make my granddaughter disappear, I'll make sure you pay for it.
Not a problem, I won't lose her. Ethan replied, remaining still. That night, we stayed at the old house. As I walked past the study before bed, I remembered when Grandpa mentioned the marriage contract. I felt both excited and unsettled, sneaking a glance at Ethan, who was looking down, his expression gloomy. To this day, I still didn't want to think about that moment. After we got back to the room, Ethan's hand began to wander, tugging at the hem of my shirt. His cool persona had faded, now he wasn't as collected. Just as he leaned in to kiss me, I raised my hand to block his face.
Ethan, why are you rejecting the marriage contract again?
I pouted, even if he thought I liked Ryan in high school, that was a long time ago, right?
Do you really want to know?
He asked, his voice low. I'd felt sad for a long time when we talked about the past. Ethan wrapped his arms around me, whispering not to bring it up again. But today, I couldn't help but revisit old wounds. He held me close, his lips brushing my ear as he spoke in a husky tone. My parents were in a marriage of convenience, but in the end... He paused, his voice strained. I'm afraid that binding you to me in a petty way will only lead to trouble. Ethan's words were vague, but I understood them clearly. Although he was still young then, he comprehended everything. If his parents had loved each other, perhaps there wouldn't have been such a tragic ending. Ethan watched me grow up healthy and happy while burying his own scars. It's my fault. I've been too cowardly. He kissed me gently, his voice soft. Then why did you agree later? I choked back tears as I turned to wipe my eyes discreetly. Ethan didn't respond for a long time. Just when I thought he had fallen asleep, I turned to look at him, only to be caught off guard by his lips on mine. Breathing heavily, Ethan spoke in broken whispers. Because you came looking for me. Thank you for coming to find me. His voice was thick with emotion. My heart melted, and I clung to his shoulder. We're not like them. Don't be afraid, Ethan. Ethan paused, then leaned down to kiss my forehead seriously.
Yeah, I love you.